quickly move to severely restrict access to abortion or ban it outright. 13 have already passed so-called trigger laws that would ban the procedure once Roe is struck down.
The goal of this is to protect the child, the unborn child.
And now a number of Democrat-led states are expanding abortion rights access, making it easier for women to travel to those states for the procedure. At the Supreme Court, I'm Justin Finch, ABC News, Washington.
And a lot of response coming out to this. Gubernatorial candidate Beto O'Rourke has released a statement today in response to the Supreme Court's decision. He says in part the Supreme Court has sent this back to the states, and our state's current governor has outlawed abortion beginning at conception with no exception for rape or incest. If you care about protecting a woman's freedom to make her own decisions about her own body, health care, and future, join this campaign and help us win. Governor Greg Abbott also released a statement. He says in part, Texas is a pro-life state and we have taken significant action to protect the sanctity of life. Texas has also prioritized supporting women's health care and expected mothers in need to give them the necessary resources so that they can choose life for their child. He then goes on to say Texas will always fight for the innocent unborn, and I will continue working with the Texas legislature and all Texans to save every child from the ravages of abortion and help our expectant mothers in need.
Now, as you heard Justin say just a little bit ago, many states had plans in place preparing for this very moment. 13 states, including Texas, have trigger laws on the books. These are laws that ban abortion once Roe v. Wade is overturned. Of those 13 states, 4 of them banned abortion before Roe v. Wade, and yes, Texas was one of them. 5 other states had pre-Roe bans that could go back into effect even though they don't have trigger laws on the books currently. And in Georgia, Iowa, Ohio, and South Carolina, abortions are already banned at 6 weeks before many women even know they're pregnant. So that's 22 states where researchers say abortion is certain to be banned. 4 other states, Florida, Indiana, Montana, and Nebraska, are considered likely to ban abortion because of recent legislation that they passed. And so when we talk about Texas's abortion law, the trigger law, in 30 days, so 30 days starting today as day 1, abortion will be banned in the state of Texas. The only exception in that law is if a woman's life is in danger.
And I mean, you just kind of think about the women that this is directly going to be impacted. Say a woman today found out that, you know, she's pregnant and she does not want this child going forward. She's going to have to find a state where she can find these resources. And I mean, there's so many scenarios that come to mind.
All right. Well, we are going to be joined now by State Senator Sarah Eckhart, who is joining us via Zoom. I believe we have her on the line now. Senator, can you hear me? Oh, I'm sorry. We're having a little bit of a difficulty getting her. We're going to have her in just a second. As you are aware, Senator Sarah Eckhart representing the Austin area as well as parts of Bastrop and Central Texas as of now. And she has been a very vocal voice at the Capitol trying to fight for a woman's right to choose, as they say, a woman's right to have an abortion if she so chooses. I'm trying to find out if we have her now. Okay, we don't quite have her now, and that's okay. I think instead we're going to chat a little bit about the weather. Hunter Williams is here. Hunter, what are we in for today?
Well, you know, we do have more heat in the forecast through this weekend, but we've been talking about this cold front here over the past couple of days. It will get here Monday of next week. That will help us out a little bit, but in the meantime, today will end up being our hottest day overall for the week. It is already 90 degrees right now in Austin. 89 at the airport. Manor right now is 88 degrees. Lakeway checking in at 91 right now. Looks like our hottest reading as of this moment is Llano at 93 degrees. And let's talk about the chances for rain. There's absolutely nothing right now as we have this big dome of high pressure that's been parked over the state. That is, remember, sinking air that is keeping our rain chances low, at least for the time being, but that will be changing next week. Now, here's a look at our numbers for today. 105 is my forecast high. That would tie the daily record. Remember, yesterday we also tied the daily record. The existing record today was set back in 2009. It is triple digits essentially all across Central Texas today. 104 for Lockhart, Bastrop 103, LaGrange 104, Giddings we're looking at about 102, Mason and Llano across the hill country 104 in the forecast for today. If you have weekend plans, it is still scorching hot over the weekend, but we're not dodging rain, at least not yet. Saturday, we may cool off just a little bit, down to 103. I'll keep us at about 103 for Sunday. A 10% rain chance for late day Sunday. That would be just a stray shower or storm during the heat of the day. But Sunday still should be primarily dry as we wait on our cold front. So again, we've talked a lot about this ridge of high pressure, or the heat dome as we call it, that's been parked over us. It stays here through the weekend, keeps us scorching hot. But watch this. As we go into early next week, here is Monday. Here's the high pressure. The flow around it as it moves to the west will bring in this cold front, and that is going to increase our rain chances as we get into Monday and Tuesday especially. We'll talk much more about these rain chances and how much could fall coming up in just a few minutes. We'll be right back after this break.
Coming out was incredibly hard.
Welcome back to KVUE News Midday. We're continuing to cover the U.S. Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe versus Wade. Texas State Senator Sarah Eckhart is joining us now live to weigh in on this decision. Senator Eckhart, thank you for taking some time to chat with us.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me.
You know, first talk to us about your reaction to this decision as something that we, on one hand did see coming.
We did see it coming. We knew that with the Supreme Court's decision, that would open up the floodgates for the state of Texas to hunt the most fundamental of women's rights to extinction. So we were unfortunately prepared for this moment, but now we have a date. July 24th is the date on which safe, legal, medical abortions will become a felony, even in cases of rape in Texas.
And, this obviously a lot of emotion for a lot of people. With this day now happening, with Texas's trigger law, talk to us about the enforcement mechanisms. This will actually go after doctors, correct?
This will go after doctors. So any doctor who performs a safe and medical abortion will be liable for a felony conviction with prison time up to a life sentence.
There is an exception in the law for women who are experiencing a life-ending complication. So talk to us about, do you foresee, though, there being some issues with doctors wanting to perform abortions even in those cases?
The exposure has now been broken open so wide that many doctors will simply stop practicing this procedure in order to protect themselves. This procedure will become so difficult for women to obtain within the state of Texas that essentially their ability to decide whether, when, and with whom to have children will be seriously curtailed.
You know, I want you to talk to us about the action that you believe Democrats are taking, what you all are trying to do now in wake of this.
In the wake of this, we are highlighting for our colleagues who, unfortunately, have become so unhinged from medical fact and are so morally confused. We are trying to highlight the obvious and tragic consequences of what the policy decisions that they have made.
But in your opinion, obviously there is no will of the legislature, as they would say, to undo this. Obviously, this trigger ban, this trigger law, is something that the legislature wanted, correct?
This is something that the legislature debated and chose. And at the end of the day, what I would say to my colleagues who believe that it is a woman's moral responsibility to take every single pregnancy to full term, I would ask them to examine their moral responsibility when we will see family violence rise. We will see maternal mortality rise. We will see child poverty rise. We will see more children abandoned to the foster care system, which is already underfunded, neglectful, and abusive. That too will rise. And in that moment, I would ask my colleagues, will you have the courage to take moral responsibility, or will you claim that it was a woman's choice?
All right. State Senator Sarah Eckhart, we thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for yours.
So many aspects to cover with this, and of course we're also hearing reaction from lawmakers across the country to this landmark Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe. And today, Attorney General Ken Paxton says he is celebrating the decision. He released a statement saying, quote, "Today the question of abortion returns to the states, and in Texas that question has already been answered. Abortion is illegal here. I look forward to defending the pro-life laws of Texas and the lives of all unborn children moving forward." Of course, he's referencing the trigger laws we've been discussing here, and we have in Texas. It bans abortion 30 days after the Supreme Court issues a judgment overturning Roe versus Wade. Once again, hearing with Sarah and just everything that's been coming out. I mean, there's just so much to unpack with this going forward.
Right. So Senator Eckhart really explaining July 24th is now the date that we have. And the real impacts of this still remain to be seen, because obviously Texas already passed Senate Bill 8, which bans abortion once fetal cardiac activity is detected. It's known as the heartbeat law. And so women generally in Texas already cannot get an abortion after about 5.5, 6 weeks. So again, still remains to be seen just how big of an impact this trigger law will have, Hannah.
Absolutely, and we will continue to cover it. We're going to have more reaction to this landmark Supreme Court decision coming up.
Severe weather in your neighborhood? Safely shows
Welcome back to News Daybreak. We are in for Jenny Lee, and joining us, Hunter. Hunter, it has been such a long time that I've not gotten to sit next to you.
Yeah, you've been missing me on nights a little bit. We haven't argued about the forecast in a while.
I bet you're gonna call it a cold front.
I'll say cool front for you.
Will you say cool front from me?
Yeah,
Thank you.
we know what time of the year it is. It's late June. It's not going to get cold around here, but we do have this front that's going to move through, and it will help us out a little bit as we get into next week. I could see our numbers as cool as the low and mid 90s by the middle of next week. Today, though, will actually be our hottest day of the week as we look live from our tower cam over downtown Austin. With strong high pressure overhead, remember that's sinking air, so there is not a cloud in the sky right now. We will be up around 105 in just a few hours. 90 right now in Camp Mabry as we warm up, 89 at the airport. Dew point right now is 67, so the feels like when you factor in the humidity is 93 already in Austin, and we have comparable numbers across the rest of Central Texas. Now, the Austin area is not included in a heat advisory today, but we do have a number of them issued north and east of here, and also for parts of Milam County and Mason County here in our KVUE area. Again, do not include Austin, but regardless of whether or not there's a heat advisory, it's going to be scorching hot today. So these are the numbers. 105 would tie the daily record for Austin. Lockhart about 104 today. Llano, Mason also around 104. It's pretty much triple digits across the board today. And this is why the heat ridge, or the heat dome as we call it, is centered right over top of us. You can see a couple of disturbances riding over that, but until this moves away, our rain chances are going to be pretty much non-existent for the weekend. But speaking of this moving away, check this out. As we go into early next week, the heat dome is centered west of here. So then the clockwise flow around it will allow a weak cold front to make its way into Central Texas by Monday. So what impact will this have on our temperatures? Well, none for the weekend as we're still ahead of it, still around 103 both Saturday, Sunday. By Monday, we may drop back to the 90s. That our coolest weather, I think, will be Tuesday and Wednesday, where we could be as cool as the low and mid 90s. We want the cooler weather, but we really need the rainfall, and it looks like those are actually trending higher as far as our rain chances, especially for Monday and Tuesday. So here's Sunday afternoon. The front slowly eases through, and it's going to move through on Monday. With the front through by Monday late afternoon and evening, look at this, a pretty good coverage of scattered showers and storms. The front's going to stall down to our south. We'll get another little push of Gulf moisture. And guess what? That keeps rain chances in our forecast into Tuesday as well, and maybe even into Wednesday. So a couple of days where we'll have at least opportunities for rain and storms. So I'm hoping, although this is not going to be drought busting rain, that over the course of a few days next week, we can piece together some decent totals. I'm thinking a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch, fairly widespread, some higher totals, especially east. Unfortunately, at this point, looks like the lower totals may end up across the hill country. But based on the way the models have been trending, I would not be surprised if those may be nudged up a little bit in the coming days, so we'll keep you updated. Grass is medium today. It's been medium over the past few. Mold is low. Those were the only two things on the slide this morning. Look at that, 105 today, Saturday, Sunday, 103, and then the numbers come down next week. Not cold, but mid-90s is better than 105, which we have today. 40% rain chance Monday, Tuesday, and still a lingering rain chance into Wednesday and Thursday.
Daybreak is a celebration, and it's your alarm clock. We all woke up this morning, and I consider that A quote, massive victory for life. He released a statement shortly after the Supreme Court opinion was released saying, quote, Roe was wrong the day it was decided, and it has been wrong every day since then. If you search for the word abortion in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, you won't find it. He also said, quote, this is a momentous day, and yet the fight for life doesn't end with the Dobbs decision. It simply begins a new chapter.
Well, as we are continuing to cover this landmark decision, we are now joined by Travis County Judge Andy Brown to weigh in on what this means. Judge Brown, thank you for taking some time to talk with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You know, I want you to first share with us your reaction to the news today, to the decision.
Yeah, I mean, extremists on the Supreme Court have stripped women and everyone of the right to privacy, the access to abortion. And my initial reaction is that elections have consequences. Donald Trump said he was going to do this. Greg Abbott has said he's going to do this. So it's more important now than ever that people vote, because the majority of Americans, the majority of Texans, and the majority of people here in Travis County do not support the way this decision has gone, and instead do support the right to access to abortion.
Now, you said something very important that I think is what a lot of people are signaling where this could go when you said the right to privacy, privacy protections. What do you feel that really means, and what do you think could come next from the Supreme Court? Any number of things could come from this extreme right-wing Supreme Court. It is absolutely horrible what these Donald Trump appointees have done to the court. And frankly, I'm disappointed in the state of Texas for having a trigger law that now effectively, I believe within 30 days, abortions will be illegal here in Texas. And at the county level, we're going to do everything we can to make it easier for women to get birth control, to do everything that we can to support women locally. And we're looking at all options of how we can support people to try to continue to have this right, be it in other states, I guess is what is probably going to happen here in Texas. You know, I would imagine that both on the county level and the city level, your hands, though, are a little bit tied because of the language in Senate Bill 8, which makes anyone who aids and abets a woman in getting an abortion liable to a civil court case with a fine of a minimum of $10,000. Talk to me about, you know, what strategies you are looking at, because there are limits for you.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that's a terrible law. The district attorney in Dallas County and also here in Travis County, and I believe in many other counties, have said that they will not enforce against women who choose to seek abortions within the county. That civil law, however, does still stand, and so that will be a decision up to the civil judges as to whether or not that law applies in whichever circumstances come before them.
All right, we certainly will continue to be watching to see what the county does in reaction to this case. Judge Brown, we thank you for your time today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And he spoke about the voter turnout there, and it'll be very interesting, the amount of people, women, everyone that this is going to impact, and potentially have more people get involved in this conversation.
Right. Well, and is this what voters want? Right. Because traditionally, what we see in Texas is, however you want to slice it, low voter turnout. Texans do not turn out and vote. And as the judge said, Republicans have been saying for a very long time that this was one of their party platforms. This is one of the things that they have long wanted to do. So they are doing exactly what they told voters, exactly what they told their constituents that they would do. The Republicans are holding true to their promises to voters. And as of now, Texas is red. And so they are doing the will, you know, I would say, of the voters.
Absolutely. It speaks volumes, the power of a vote, and everyone can get involved in this conversation however you feel. And of course, we're going to continue to follow this for you throughout the morning. Stay with us.
Clogged drains causing you pain? Time to pull the plug on the
31, U.S. Representative Lloyd Doggett has been outspoken in his opposition to Roe versus Wade.
Yeah, he's joining us now to talk more about what happened today and what will happen moving forward. Good morning to you, Representative Doggett.
Thank you.
You know, I want you to first talk to us about your reaction to this decision, knowing that this is pretty much what we expected after that leak of the opinion. Talk to us about, though, your thoughts on this.
Well, Ashley, it's a dangerous and very troubling decision. I think practically it will mean needless suffering and death for so many women. We find Texas women today with less rights than they had yesterday, particularly younger Texans. And I think there are probably people watching that are saying, well, I wasn't planning to have an abortion. This is about much more than abortion, though it's very central to the decision. It has implications immediately for in vitro fertilization, someone who has a miscarriage and how they're treated, someone who has a pregnancy where the life of the mother is endangered. And of course, Republicans are intent on criminalizing abortion, even in cases of rape and incest. There was a very troubling concurrence along with this opinion that really signals where Republicans would take us, because it talks about reversing the ruling about contraception, a right to contraception. I think we'll see bills in the next session of the legislature to begin doing just that. It raises questions about same-sex relationships, a whole range of issues that take us toward a time that is very different than the rights that have been enjoyed during my generation, because these folks aren't intent on stopping with just the outrageous Texas vigilante law. They want to criminalize employers that help a woman go to New Mexico or someplace else. They want to criminalize abortion across our country and then proceed to limit access to birth control.
You know, I want to ask you, Congressman Doggett, about some of the things that you were saying there in terms of those privacy rights. I think it's interesting. Hannah read a statement from Senator Ted Cruz moments ago who says women never had a constitutional right, that it's not in the Constitution to have a right to abortion, to have a right to be able to seek that. So talk to us about your reaction to that in terms of privacy.
For almost 50 years, that right has been recognized as a basic constitutional right, and before it, a constitutional right to contraception, and more recently, a constitutional right in privacy in same-sex relationships. And I think Senator Cruz put it well. That is exactly the philosophy of the Republican Party that he leads, that would criminalize abortion across the country, claiming we have no protection against that at all. And I think where we are today, other than being angry and outraged about what we see, we will not see it change at the courthouse. It is a question of holding every official accountable for their position on privacy and reproductive freedom. I know we'll have protests and the like all over the country, especially in the Austin area, but we need not only days of rage, but to convert that into days of action. The change has to come at the ballot box, by holding officials elected to their accountability on reproductive freedom. We have these major elections coming up in the fall. Now is the time for people who took their rights for granted to get engaged fully, not just by voting, but by getting others engaged in the political process.
All right, Representative Lloyd Doggett, we thank you so much for taking some time to talk with us today.
Thank you very much.
Well, let's take a look at public opinion. ABC News and the Washington Post conducted a poll about abortion before the leak of the draft opinion. In that poll, 54% of Americans supported upholding Roe, 28% supported overturning it. The remaining 18% did not have an opinion. Well, and when it comes to the decision about whether a woman can get an abortion, 70% of Americans said that decision should be left to a woman and her doctor. 24% said it should be regulated by law.
And we still have a lot more to talk about with this. You talk about looking at social media. Everyone's coming out with different opinions, being very vocal on it. Stay with us. We'll continue to discuss.
Mike just has that
Welcome back on this Friday morning. We've been hearing from local leaders this decision for the Supreme Court to overturn Roe versus Wade. Let's now hear from ABC News.
It was the correct decision as a matter of constitutional law and application of the fundamental right to privacy and liberty in matters of family and personal autonomy. It was a decision on a complex matter that drew a careful balance between a woman's right to choose earlier in her pregnancy and the state's ability to regulate later in her pregnancy. A decision with broad national consensus that most Americans of faith and backgrounds found acceptable, and that have been the law of the land for most of the lifetime of Americans today. And it was a constitutional principle upheld by justices appointed by Democrat and Republican presidents alike. Roe v. Wade was a 7-2 decision written by a justice appointed by a Republican president, Richard Nixon. In the 5 decades that followed Roe v. Wade, justices appointed by Republican presidents from Eisenhower, Nixon, and Reagan, George W. Bush, were among the justices who voted to uphold the principles set forth in Roe v. Wade. It was 3 justices named by one president, Donald Trump, who were the core of today's decision to upend the scales of justice and eliminate a fundamental right for women in this country. Make no mistake, this decision is a culmination of a deliberate effort over decades to upset the balance of our law. It's a realization of an extreme ideology and a tragic error by the Supreme Court, in my view. The court has done what it has never done before, expressly take away a constitutional right that is so fundamental to so many Americans that had already been recognized. The court's decision to do so will have real and immediate consequences. State laws banning abortion are automatically taking effect today, jeopardizing the health of millions of women, some without exceptions. So extreme that women could be punished for protecting their health. So extreme that women and girls who are forced to bear their rapist's child, with the child a consequence. It just stuns me. So extreme that doctors will be criminalized for fulfilling their duty to care. Imagine having a young woman have to carry the child of incest as a consequence of incest. No option. Too often the case. The poor women are going to be hit the hardest. It's cruel. In fact, the court laid out state laws criminalizing abortion that go back to the 1800s as a rationale. The court literally taking America back 150 years. This is a sad day for the country, in my view. But it doesn't mean the fight's over. Let me be very clear and unambiguous. The only way we can secure a woman's right to choose and the balance that existed is for Congress to restore the protections of Roe v. Wade as federal law. No executive action from the president can do that. And if Congress, as it appears, lacks the votes to do that now, voters need to make their voices heard. This fall, we must elect more senators and representatives who will codify women's right to choose into federal law once again. Elect more state leaders to protect this right at the local level. We need to restore the protections of Roe as law of the land. We need to elect officials who will do that. This fall, Roe is on the ballot. Personal freedoms are on the ballot. The right to privacy, liberty, equality, they're all on the ballot. Until then, I will do all of my power to protect a woman's right in states where they will face the consequences of today's decision. While the court's decision cast a dark shadow over a large swath of the land, many states in this country still recognize a woman's right to choose. So, if a woman lives in a state that restricts abortion, the Supreme Court's decision does not prevent her from traveling from her home state to the state that allows it. It does not prevent a doctor in that state from treating her. As the Attorney General has made clear, women must remain free to travel safely to another state to seek care they need. My administration will defend that bedrock right. If any state or local official, high or low, tries to interfere with a woman's exercising her basic right to travel, I will do everything in my power to fight that deeply un-American attack. My administration will also protect a woman's access to medications that are approved by the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, like contraception, which is essential for preventative health care, mifepristone, which the FDA approved 20 years ago to safely end early pregnancies and is commonly used to treat miscarriages. Some states are saying that they'll try to ban or severely restrict access to these medications. But extremist governors and state legislators are looking to block the mail or search a person's medicine cabinet or control a woman's actions by tracking data on her apps she uses are wrong and extreme and out of touch with the majority of Americans. The American Medical Association, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists wrote to me and Vice President Harris stressing that these laws are not based on evidence and asking us to act to protect access to care. They say by limiting access to these medicines, maternal mortality will climb in America. That's what they say. Today, I'm directing the Department of Health and Human Services to take steps to ensure these critical medications are available to the fullest extent possible. And the politicians cannot interfere in the decisions that should be made between a woman and her doctor. And my administration will remain vigilant as the implications of this decision play out. I've warned about how this decision risks the broader right to privacy for everyone. That's because Roe recognized the fundamental right to privacy that has served as a basis for so many more rights that we've come to take for granted, that are ingrained in the fabric of this country. The right to make the best decisions for your health. The right to use birth control, a married couple in the privacy of their bedroom, for God's sake. The right to marry the person you love. Now, Justice Thomas said as much today. He explicitly called to reconsider the right of marriage equality, the right of couples to make their choices on contraception. This is extreme and dangerous path the court is now taking us on. Let me close with 2 points. First, I call on everyone, no matter how deeply they care about this decision, to keep all protests peaceful. Peaceful, peaceful, peaceful. No intimidation. Violence is never acceptable. Threats and intimidation are not speech. We must stand against violence in any form, regardless of your rationale. Second, I know so many of us are frustrated and disillusioned that the court has taken something away that's so fundamental. I know so many women are now going to face incredibly difficult situations. I hear you. I support you. I stand with you. The consequences and the consensus of the American people, core principles of equality, liberty, dignity, and the stability of the rule of law demand that Roe should not have been overturned. With this decision, the conservative majority of the Supreme Court shows how extreme it is, how far removed they are from the majority of this country. They made the United States an outlier among developed nations in the world. But this decision must not be the final word. My administration will use all of its appropriate lawful powers, but Congress must act. And with your vote, you can act. You can have the final word. This is not over. Thank you very much. More to say this in weeks to come. Thank you.
President Biden at the White House responding to the history made on this day, the Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade, a woman's right to choose, and turning that decision back to the states to decide whether or not a woman can choose her own future. The president saying this is a fundamental right to privacy that had broad national consensus. It had been the law of the land for 50 years, upheld by justices appointed by both Democrats and Republican presidents. He pointed to 3 justices appointed by Donald Trump, who he said were at the center of this decision after decades of precedent. He called it a tragic error. He said this decision looked back at legal theory from the 1800s. He said literally taking America back more than 100 years to come up with this decision. He talked about how extreme it is, in his words, that women can be punished for making a choice on their own. He pivoted to the election, the midterms approaching. He said voters need to make their voices heard this fall, not only on the national level when it comes to the Senate, and elect more Democrats. He was making the case for in the Senate, if you want to protect this choice, to elect more state leaders who will protect this right. He said, make no mistake, this fall, Roe is on the ballot. Personal freedom is on the ballot, and he also talked about how this could go even beyond Roe versus Wade and a woman's right to choose. I want to bring in our chief White House correspondent, Cecilia Vega. The president making it very clear this will be a defining issue of the midterm, Cecilia.
David, he did. He said that, but you know, I've got to point out, leading up to this, in the recent weeks since this draft opinion was leaked, there were emergency meetings at the White House with advocacy groups and lawyers and White House officials. He called on the Gender Policy Council, the White House counsel's office. They'd been gathering all together in these closed-door meetings, trying to come up with a plan. There was never a consensus that the White House could executive order their way out of this, but there had been a lot of discussion about plans, that potential things that they could do in some of these red states where women would be affected immediately, those 13 states where these trigger laws are now taking effect. But you didn't really hear the president talk about any of that. And I think a lot of progressives and a lot of pro-choice people in this country are certainly looking at this White House, and to particularly this president, for some bold executive action. Not that any of that would restore the rights of Roe, but certainly get a little closer to offer some protections that potentially they could do. And that did not come out of the president just now. He mentioned that he really wants Congress to codify Roe versus Wade. Now, what that means is essentially Congress would guarantee abortion access nationwide. Look, it passed in the House, but it failed in the Senate just last month. They have basically moved past that. There is no chance that Congress is going to codify Roe versus Wade anytime soon. So you scrap that. Then you heard the president say that perhaps DHS could make abortion pills more readily available to women around the country. Certainly, I think a lot of pro-choice people would feel like that is going to help in some situations. But, you know, you also had advocates say that they wanted to hear this White House perhaps go beyond that, to see if funding can be made available in an emergency way to help women get transportation to these states outside of theirs where access is no longer allowed, to perhaps use federal buildings to allow abortion providers to perform services in states where this is not allowed. But you didn't hear any of that from this president today, David, and I think a lot of folks in the progressive side of his party are going to be wondering if he, in fact, is the one who is going to be able to lead this fight on abortion rights heading into the midterms in November.
Cecilia Vega, following this reaction from the president to the Supreme Court ruling overturning Roe versus Wade. Cecilia, thank you. You heard President Biden there speak of 3 justices appointed by the former president, Donald Trump. He said who were at the center of this decision-making, who helped drive this, in so many words, he said. We do have reaction from former President Trump, not to President Biden, but to the ruling. Former President Trump saying a short time before we came back on the air here, when asked whether he feels he played a role in the reversal of Roe versus Wade after having appointed 3 conservative justices to the high court, the former President Trump told Fox News, God made the decision. So when asked if he played a role in this reversal, he said God made the decision. I want to bring in Rachel Scott. She's in front of the Supreme Court, where she has been since this decision was handed down several hours ago. And what's the status of the crowds there? We can see that they are still quite significant.
They are, David. D.C. is on high alert as the crowds out here continue to grow. Just take a look behind me. We are seeing the response to this decision minute by minute. We are seeing the crowds out in front of the Supreme Court here grow. And when the decision initially came out, we did see people on both sides of this issue gather out here outside of the Supreme Court. But within the last 30 minutes, we have really seen this start to change. Outrage is spilling over here. These people behind me say this feels like a gut punch to them. They have been out here for weeks. I met people as far away as Florida, Ohio, who told me after that leaked draft opinion came out, they traveled here to Washington, D.C. They have been protesting here every single day, trying to send a message to the justices on the bench. Now they say where they are standing right now is extremely intentional, because not only are they in front of the Supreme Court, they are also in front of the United States Capitol. They say their message now turns to lawmakers. They want them to codify Roe versus Wade, but as Cecilia mentioned, there is absolutely no appetite for that among Republicans over on the Capitol, David.
Interesting you bring that point up about making it a federal law, Roe versus Wade. Rachel, stick with us for the follow-up here, because you have covered this on the Hill repeatedly. You've questioned pro-choice Republican senators, including Susan Collins. She's just out with a statement, and I wanted to get your reaction, Rachel. Susan Collins, pro-choice Republican from Maine, has said that this decision is inconsistent with what Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh said in their testimony and in their meetings with me, where they both were insistent on the importance of supporting long-standing precedents that the country has relied on, seeming to imply that they indicated to her that Roe versus Wade was precedent and that it was important to support long-standing precedent in this country. Now we've seen that they have not, and she knows there is significant heat coming her way now.
Make no mistake about it. I am told that she is.
Rachel Scott's live reporting, freezing there. That is the way television goes on these live events. We'll go back to her as soon as we can. I want to bring in Mary Bruce live outside the White House. Mary, we can pick up that thought with you, actually. Susan Collins, you heard that statement she's just issued, one of the pro-choice Republicans who will feel heat because she said publicly, after having met with some of former President Trump's choices for the court, saying she was confident that they would uphold Roe versus Wade. They have not done so. She now says they were inconsistent. What their decision is inconsistent with what they had indicated to her.
Yeah, she took them at their word that they were going to uphold this right, and clearly that is not the case. And I think she will be getting a lot of political heat for this, and she knows that. I think she was not pleased, obviously, when the draft opinion came out, and knows the amount of heat that she's going to face going forward. And David, I have to tell you, I was just in the room with the president. I cannot remember the last time I saw him this angry, frustrated, and quite frankly sad. That gut punch that Rachel was talking about, you can tell the president feels that as well. In the room were many of his female staffers hugging each other, consoling each other, well aware of the fight ahead here. You heard the president outline some of the steps that he wants to take, but he is well aware of his limitations here, that anything he does won't have a huge sweeping impact. It certainly may have an impact, but it also will likely be caught up in a lot of litigation, and that is why the focus is so squarely on these elections. The president saying Roe is on the ballot, urging Americans to make their vote count, because if anything, this decision shows that votes do matter. David.
Let's drill down, Mary. The bottom line here then, as he turns and pivots to the midterm saying Roe is on the ballot, the Democrats would need 60 votes in the Senate, and then he would need to hold on to their majority in the House in order to ever be able to make Roe versus Wade federal law.
And David, we know that that is a tall order. Democrats are very concerned about how the midterms are shaping up for them, and it is going to take a lot to get enough Democrats in office to codify Roe into law, which is what the president is calling for. But right now, that will be the best chance to have any real lasting permanent impact on this. And the president was really blunt, right, in saying that he never before has the court, in his view, fundamentally stripped away what he says is a constitutional right. And you heard us there at the end shouting, asking, is he still confident in the court? David, he wouldn't say.
Mary Bruce live at the White House. Mary, our thanks to you as always. I want to bring in Terry Moran, who has covered the Supreme Court for years for us here on ABC. Terry, we were on the air earlier talking about these 13 states with trigger laws that go into effect almost immediately. We know Missouri, their ban has already gone into effect. We know in Alabama, the governor there says they will work to get that ban into effect immediately. And these 13 states among 26 states, more than half the country, expected to move quickly on this historic decision from the court.
Absolutely, David. As of today, women in America occupy a different station in our society. In much of the country today, as you just outlined, and more to come, women will have a completely different relationship to the choices they make of their own bodies when they are pregnant. In other parts of the country, they will continue to have those choices. That's why the battleground is not necessarily in the Congress, although the president will try to lead the Democrats to a midterm victory, which right now seems far away. And if anything, if the Republicans take over, there will be Republican members of Congress who introduce bills to ban abortion by federal law nationwide. But the real battleground is going to be in the states. And there, as in the Republican Party at large, there is a kind of ratchet toward more extreme laws. For a Republican to oppose a law, for example, that would outlaw abortion entirely from the beginning and criminalize women who choose it, those laws will be introduced. There's no question about it, and it'll be difficult for many Republicans to vote against them.
And so we'll be watching that at the state level. In the meantime, one last question for you, Terry, before we go here, because the bigger issue also coming out of this, and you heard the president mention this, the president says the court has now shown how extreme it is and that it's far removed from the majority of the American people. And Terry, you well know the polling just as recently as a couple of days ago from Quinnipiac, not long before that from Pew, showing more than 60% of Americans believe that this is should be a woman's choice, and the ABC News polling, which was even higher than that, saying this is a private choice between a woman and her doctor, the court not reflecting what we're seeing in the polling.
No, the justices who found and overruled Roe, found this ruling and overruled Roe, would say, well, you can exercise those opinions in your state legislatures and localities. What this court is demonstrating, however, is that when it comes to what are settled law, what was thought to be settled law, as even Justices Kavanaugh and Gorsuch talked about Roe versus Wade, they are activist judges. These are judges who will reach out and reject decades of precedent and of the reasoning involved in order to achieve what they think are the more pure constitutional doctrines. Their reliance on the traditional conservative value of judicial restraint is very minimal. We are in a new era with a new activist court.
Terry Moran, Rachel Scott, Mary Bruce, and Cecilia Vega, my thanks to all of you. The president reacting to the Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade. Our coverage continues on ABC News Live, abcnews.com. I'll be back with the entire team a little later today for World News Tonight. I'm David Muir in New York. Good day.
This has been a special report from ABC News.